Okay, so thank you so much for coming. And I just wanted to briefly say that both Rob and Tina are a Leading from the Middle alumni. And when they were working on their project, in order to build coalitions, they went around the campus and they became known as the Rob and Tina Show. So I will let them introduce themselves. So please take it away.
Hey, Tina, you want to start this one or should I?
No, you can go.
So that's actually an inside joke. I asked, I'm going to ask her what her recollection is of why we do that. But we started off just about every talk like that, and my recollection of it is that when we went to LFM, one of the person who was our team lead was uncomfortable with public speaking, and she used to always say, "Hey, can you go do your professor thing?" Including at LFM meetings. What's
Yeah,
your
yeah,
recollection of why
yeah.
we were doing that?
And I kept saying, well, Rob's a better teacher than, he talks to a whole lot of people, because he has, Art 160 and he has 100 students at one time and I have 30, or I have one in my office. And so I'm like, oh, go ahead, Rob. You go first. You go first. So it's always been, you go ahead.
I just we just thought if we're getting back together, we needed to start with that. So I know at least I've met at least two of you beforehand, but for those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Rob Stevenson, and the two of us, I think we started in 2018 was when we were in the academy,
Mhm.
and when we attended, I was in the role of professor of art and art history. And now I am the Dean of the School of Arts, Performance, and the Humanities at Modesto Junior College. And I'm an LFM, one of LFM's facilitators.
And my name is Tina Jerome. And when I first started LFM, I was an athletics counselor. And currently, I'm actually serving as an interim articulation officer. So, with this work of LFM and leadership, has opened up some doors for me that I would have never thought about.
Yeah, so today we wanted to tell you a little about our LFM experience. As I mentioned, we were in the 2018 Academy on a Modesto Junior College team. We're both still at that institution. And that was part of what was a 5-year partnership for us,
Mhm.
which I think we both think of this as LFM as a formative experience in the middle of experiencing other activities as well, right? So we're going to talk about some of the other parts of our leadership journey. But for us, this was a huge thing in terms of forming our partnership and developing our project. But another thing we wanted to talk about is how LFM as an academy, it often attracts participants because of the project
Mhm.
and then we might say entrap, but entice them into developing as mid-level leaders. And so we're going to talk about our successful LFM project, but we're also going to talk about LFM academies as a way to develop a leadership capacity at your college.
Mhm.
When we went, we had this fantastic coach, Chris Hill, who was also our coach for our college. And we were lucky enough to be part of the CAGP Guided Pathways 20, right? And so, we thought we should start this talk with a moment where, she was talking to us at an LFM Academy. She's already met us in this other context. And she asked us to write down, it was either a leadership statement or your leadership philosophy. We can't quite remember which one. And we argued with her about whether we were leaders or not. And um, you know, leadership is in the title of the program. We really should have understood that we were there for a leadership academy, right? And at the time, I was on the Senate executive and like co-chaired the instruction council, and I was leading CID stuff at the state level and the chairman of the equivalency committee. And I'd never really seen a definition that fit what I kind of thought of as leader. And it wasn't until we started digging into mid-level leader that I saw myself in something we were talking about. So, later found a term for it, which is kind of accidental leader, which There are quite a bit of writings in the literature about how this happens in academia in particular. But for us, this was, I think f both of us are faculty who found themselves leading through, this kind of organic process of wanting to do good things and then slowly realizing that you're moving toward leadership and maybe you didn't know that was happening. Tina, what were your views on leadership?
Well, to be honest, I used to equate leadership strictly as with management. And because of my experiences with administrative management and the cultural shifts, I had honestly a fairly negative view of what that term was. So when Chris Hill was asking us about leadership or being a leader, both I'm like, I'm not a leader because I didn't want to put myself in that circle because I don't think my personality is in that realm either. And so, for a long time, like I said, I resisted that label as a leader. But after watching various administrations try to force changes on our campus, I was skeptical of what leadership actually meant. So, LFM really opened my eyes and changed my opinion of what leadership can be for individuals. And so I wanted to, my goal in doing this work with LFM was to give back to MJC and help students navigate their paths. As a counselor, it's a natural transition, right? But through my work of guided pathways and the LFM training, my eyes were like opened up so wide that what I had an opinion before is not what I have it now. I learned that leadership isn't a job description, it's an action. You don't have to have a specific title to be a leader. And so that's, on our campus, we created a coalition of people that didn't have that role as a management role, a role as faculty. They don't have that coordinator or the director title. They have a person who wants to do a specific project, situation, a passion, and they become the leader to make a difference on our campus.
So, I mean, so we were in a very similar place at that
Mhm.
time. And, our story makes a little bit more sense if you hear about how we became Guided Pathways faculty co-leads. That was actually the title that we eventually settled on. So, like I said, our college start was an early starter, and we were in the CAGP 20, which was the pilot program. And the Senate president had asked me to take the lead because he knew I had a background in curriculum at both the local and the state level, and I had the Senate background. But I liked working behind the scenes, more like somebody who wrote documents, or I don't know, a producer. I have no idea what I was thinking I did. At any rate, I kept telling him no, that I liked doing discrete pieces of work. And so, on the day that he needed to make that appointment, it's a Brown Act committee. He's got to send out an agenda and all of that. I remember taking his call and pulling over to the side of the road, and I really didn't want to take this particular spot because there was it was going to take a lot of time, and I was in the one person art history program, right, which is a little bit tough to take this big chunk of work with. But also, I wasn't sure that at that point I wanted to work with our executive team. Things hadn't been as great as they could. They were just starting to go well in my relationships with those folks. I wasn't sure that this was the right move, and so I argued with him, and he told me who he was going to appoint. And that person's philosophy was completely counter to what I wanted guided pathways to be. And Curtis knew it, and he didn't want that either. And I know we yelled a little bit. The part that I remember is at the end saying, F you, Curtis Martin, I'll take the job, and like hanging up on him. And I want to just take this moment to publicly thank Curtis Martin for forcing me to do this job and recognizing that I needed to do it because I wouldn't have if he hadn't given that call. So, so there it was. I was appointed. It was the end of the fall of 2016, and I'd agreed to become sort of the Guided Pathways Academic Senate spot. But he and I had talked, and we wanted an effort that would embrace counseling. So we knew that it couldn't be me as a lead. I needed a co-lead, and they kept trying to build the school that is a single chair structure. And so by the time we showed up in spring 2017, there was a new shared governance document coming around, and there were subcommittees in it. And of course, one of them was Guided Pathways Subcommittee Student Services, splitting us.
Hmm.
What was yours like?
Yeah. So I too got a similar call from Curtis in spring of 2017, I think early on. And in my office, we were just talking about our phones and it says caller ID. So I knew it was Curtis and he was academic senate president. So I better get that. It's probably important, because Curtis never calls me. And so he says, Tina, how would you like to make a difference for the last years of MJC? It'd be your legacy. And I said, Curtis, what are you talking about? I didn't know. And he goes, you know about guided pathways, right? And I said, oh, yeah, I heard it. I went to the retreat. We heard Rob Johnstone, and what his spiel was and stuff. So I knew about it. And so Curtis says, we need people like you to help lead this campus for the benefit of students. Well, Curtis knew where my buttons were. He knew I would then say yes because I am the student advocate, like a cheerleader on campus for students, right? So he knew that as soon as he said that, I'd be hooked. I could do this. I said, but I said, Curtis, there's no way I can. I didn't realize at the time that Rob was already appointed. And I said, I can't do this by myself. And I said, I'm totally swamped as the athletic counselor. I have 550 students that it's just me. Like that's my cohort of students. So I said, I'll need help. I can't do this. And he says, oh, no, no, no. I got Rob Stevenson. You guys are going to do great as co-leads. And I said, okay, I like Rob. So yeah, 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 I can work with Rob. I said he and I could work together because he gets things done because, I've watched him in Senate and stuff. So I'm like, yep, we're two peas in a pod on that sense. We're going to get something done. So,
I didn't talk about this with you when we were figuring out what to say, but I remember the time that I met you
huh?
and you walked right up to me in the Senate, sat down right next to me and were like, "Hey, I'm Tina Jerome. I think you would be really great teaching art for folks in the athletics cohort." And so then there's a couple years where I don't remember interactions, but I remember that
Oh, that's
perfectly.
funny. That's funny. I
So
did do that.
you did.
That's so funny. That's funny.
Yeah, so chemistry is a good thing.
Yeah.
And we really wanted this to be like an equal partnership
Mhm.
because we didn't think that the guided pathways reforms would be accepted by everybody unless we were able to actually inhabit and model for people a partnership between instruction and student services, which were really big silos on our campus. Like
Yeah.
even instructional faculty and counseling faculty,
Oh, yeah.
we're not necessarily
No,
talking so
no.
much.
Yeah, so for departments, our departments were working in silos. I mean, even our divisions were working in silos. And so Rob and I talked. We realized that we really wanted real institutional change. We needed all hands on deck. I mean, that was every pocket of the campus. And so we'd seen change attempted before without buy-in, and it failed miserably. And so we didn't want to repeat that history. So we teamed up. We wanted a model, like Rob said, instructional and student services faculty building a plan together and creating a coalition really to institutionalize guided pathways. So we didn't have a roadmap, let alone a perfect roadmap. We just knew we had to lean on each other's strengths. And then the relationships, we had different relationships across pockets of the campus. So we knew that we could, pull from those pockets when we needed some assistance. And so you'll learn, and through us talking, that the tools that we learned in LFM, we didn't realize that these tools we were using at first, and then it solidified in LFM that it's like, yes, we got the coalitions, we got the namesayers, we got these folks. And so anyway, so at our core, both of us are actually true collaborators who believe in including everybody's voice. Again, I don't believe in wearing a particular hat. Everybody is important. It doesn't matter what your job title is. Everybody's voice is important. And so we started talking to our colleagues. We could feel the deep-seated pain and distrust, don't you think?
Oh yeah.
Like
Oh yeah.
towards leadership, yeah, it was not good. So we knew our word, our integrity had to carry some weight, and so we had to be 100% committed to bringing everybody to the table. So Rob is incredible at bringing logic and reading a room. So through his years on campus, he already had deep trust from the instructional faculty. And then on the flip side, I had the trust of my own colleagues in student services. So we learned exactly when to take the lead when we step into a room and when somebody else should take the lead, take a back seat to this. And so basically that modeling was real of a real working partnership, so we knew that we'd have to have both sets of faculty and build trust together as an institution and not again in those little silos that we had to bring everybody together. So we knew that one of the activities of Guided Pathways was to write program maps. And so we knew that one person couldn't do it or one set of individuals couldn't do it. We had to bring all the faculty together, including student services and instructional faculty.
Yeah, I think you might be selling yourself a little short in this analysis here. I think Tina leads with empathy and leads with her humanity first. And there were a lot of times where, I can have kind of a cold affect or an academic affect that just didn't play the same
Mhm.
as Tina talking about a subject. So this partnership was just perfect in terms of skill sets. I really appreciated the way that you looked at a room differently than I did. It taught me a ton.
That body language, that counselors are.
Yeah, that's not in my wheelhouse. So there were times where we had to actually fight for team leadership to be recognized. I don't know if you guys have experienced that, but our college seemed to like the idea that there'd be like one person doing things, and we kind of felt like you should be able to talk to either of us, and it was actually our job to talk to each other, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And so we actually had to fight for each other to understand for the college to understand that we were equal partners. And so we had a hard time getting equal pay for Tina. This really bothered both of us. I didn't actually realize this was happening at first. She was getting paid out of a student services budget, and I was getting, I think, paid out of the Guided Pathways budget, which was held by the Office of Instruction. And we'd waited like a year to get any pay on this thing as it was. So when we started comparing notes, it turned out she was getting substantially less. And I knew she was going to be uncomfortable fighting that fight, and I'm just not. So that was that was perfectly fine with me. And I had a really strong relationship with the VPI who held the Guided Pathways monies, who is herself this incredible strong female leader who modeled that for our campus. And so it was just a few days off. So I kind of waited for Women's Equal Pay Day and walked into Jennifer's office and said, "Hey, there's this problem, and I'd really like you to look into it." And I swear it was the next day. She's like, "Nope, Tina is on this budget. It is she'll get paid for the work that she should have been paid for, and it'll be the same from now on." And I thought it was really great that we were able to behind the scenes also model that equal partnership, and it was respected by our VPI. Um,
Well, and I think it was a wonderful financial boost to me, honestly speaking. And, this work is a labor of love, anyways. And so I was like, we did it for free for a year. So it wasn't like I was expecting anything, but even having somebody to go to bat for you and furthermore a male, and it was just so nice. It was just, so thoughtful. But that's, honestly when I realized that our leadership was changing as well. Our leadership and our administration was changing. And so you could see that equality happening, on our campus. So it started the culture shift, and I think that through the work that we've done really has, I think, helped with that culture shift on campus, don't you think?
I
Yeah.
I would really like to think so. I think so, and I really want it to be true.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
I
But
really hope it's true.
yeah.
So, Yeah, so I mean, we were intentional in a lot of the things we were doing, but we were also kind of like hapless and clueless. So
Mhm.
the story of how we get to LFM is kind of a quirky one. Curtis Martin, that Senate president, who, by the way, now is an LFM coach. He was, I think, a two-time
Yeah.
participant as well.
Mhm.
Um, he gave us the dates for this thing that he didn't even tell us what the initials stood for. He just said,
Yeah.
put down dates for LFM. So we put down dates because we were doing that in the CAGP thing. And he just really never explained what it was. He just kept reinforcing it's really important if you want to get a successful guided pathways initiative. Like we need to do this. So we prioritized it. And so we sort of knew it was like about the project. We got that part. It was going to be about guided pathways. But we had no idea it was also about mid-level leadership. And he built this really great, he and our executive leadership had built this cross-functional team. There were the two of us, a part-time faculty member, a student services dean, and a student services specialist. And so we were this great, cross-functional team. And then Curtis had a personal emergency and had to step away like the night before we went. That's
Mhm.
actually how we got that part-time person. He could do Senate work. His name is Hans. We're going to talk about him a little bit. He's like our kind of invisible third musketeer. Um, we wouldn't have gotten this done without him behind the scenes, like always being there, diligently working. And this guy had 12 hours to decide on whether to go to LFM. He's part-time, so he's not salaried. He knows he's not getting paid for this. So we finished the drink because this is over dinner. He tells us that he can't go and that now Hans is going to be going. We less than 12 hours later, we're picking Hans up on the way down to Southern California, and he's already cooked scones that were, by the way, fantastic. We knew this is going to be great. It was a fantastic 6 hours of talking about all the things we wanted to do.
Yeah, I think that's when you learned that counselors are not trained how to do academic
I have
advising
no idea.
in our master's degree program. He's like, "What?" And so I'm like, "Yeah, we're not trained to do that. We're trained to do personal counseling, crisis counseling."
I can't be the only one who
Yeah,
didn't know that there was no training for
yeah,
counselors on
yeah.
like picking schedules in the
So
school.
even driving down to LFM was really nice because we got to learn about each other and our strengths and not, I didn't know who Hans was at all. So but anyway, so when we all came to the first session of LFM, like you said, I don't know that I even knew what LFM was. I just knew I had to go. And so the first session we listened to the LFM facilitators and then they let us out for our team time. And so we all of us looked at each other and we're like, well, where do we start? We have this guided pathways, you know, foundation, right? But we're not sure what to do. So,
Yeah, it was confounding. So, Curtis has been the one who had been in on the application.
mhm,
We'd never seen it. Again, we
mhm,
don't know what a mid-level leader training. I don't at least understand that. So I actually called our VPI like on this break, and she said, "Okay, I'll get the application." And so it was one line. Our project was implement guided pathways on MJC campus.
mhm.
And I kind of looked at Tina. I was like, "Is that all?" Like, you know,
What does
uh,
what does that
because
mean?
we'd only talked about this as like a multi-year project,
Yeah.
and but we realized something, we were doing the CAGP thing
Mhm,
with the executive leadership, and everything there was 10,000 foot level, right? There wasn't a lot of understanding on how to do the thing. So we were gonna actually get to make the plan and organize how things happen if we wanted it to work that way.
mhm.
And it turned out, yeah, we
Well,
sort of looked at it and went, I think we get to write this thing.
yeah, we did. We did. And I think, one thing that we knew for sure is that we had to implement this in fall of 2020. So we started the journey of our backwards design. So LFM, as you guys know, provides, project-based curriculum. And in our experience, there were tools that arrived just at the time that we needed them. It was just amazing. It was just a good flow. And so we wanted to give some examples of what we thought, are great tools and how our backward design kind of actually took took effect.
Yeah, and tools we still use, right? Like
Oh
so
yeah.
so I think it was probably the logic model. I was
So,
trying to remember where we started with backwards design, and I think it just occurred to me like right now. So yeah, I think it was the logic model where we started thinking like that. Like, okay,
Mhm.
so how do you start at this date
Right.
and figure out what all the things are you need to get into that?
Yeah.
But it was so we're going to talk about a few pieces of the curriculum here.
Mhm.
And one of the things that was a big takeaway for us, because we're the only people on both teams
Right.
who are going to the CAGP thing
Mhm.
and leading from the middle, is that we saw a really different kind of format in LFM. There's this home, I mean, this is people who've been in it, so I don't have to explain too much to you our home team away team thing, right? But we had to learn what that was. So it's a little counterintuitive that you're the away team but you're doing all the planning. And then you go back and you still meet at home, but you're the away team. And then there's a home team where you try and bring these other people in and try and, widen the amount of buy-in. And then those people help you get buy-in throughout the rest of the campus. But something that occurred to me as this was going is we weren't very efficient in our time use. And so I started just collecting from people items that they needed. Later, I started synthesizing things we'd been talking about and sending agendas beforehand because our team lead didn't really do that. And these agendas, I mean, you and I would talk about it
Mhm.
beforehand. We realized that meant if you bring an agenda, you actually set the agenda.
Mhm.
I don't know why that wasn't apparent beforehand, but actually a really big part of leading, right? Is
Right.
is setting up a structured conversation that
Mhm.
can do business.
Right.
We weren't using it in any way that was
Mhm.
untoward or we weren't being dishonest with it. It literally was, let's not just talk.
Mhm.
Let's actually set this thing up. And then that set us up for something kind of different, which was we also realized that committees just don't do stuff, right?
Right.
Like committees, I mean, they do a lot of things and they edit a lot of things, but they don't make a lot of things. How about that? They form subcommittees.
Right.
And so we realized not only in our LFM team did we have to start the work for other people to criticize and edit and get that going, but we had to do it for our college.
Yeah.
And then we had to walk it through the college.
Mhm.
And figuring that out was really important. And of course, you don't get everything you want. But I think when you build something, you form the structure. And so they're talking about things within your terms. So you're going to get 80 to 90% just by doing it that way. And maybe just be okay with accepting a lot of good input on the 10 to 20% that goes in there. Don't hold it too tightly. I think that was something we learned.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. So, so at LFM, we started, mapping out what our, goals were and things like that. And one thing I think a tool that we use, I think to this day, even whenever we have
I think we
things,
use all of it.
I know we still use it. Yeah, is the stakeholder map. It's really important to have because you need to know who's in the room, who's on board with a new initiative, who isn't, and who do you need to go out and seek more information from, or who are your key players in your ecosystem, and so that's one of the things that we did. We brought that tool back to our campus and started looking around and saying, who who do we need to reach out and what do we need to say in our elevator speech. And so that's the other tool that we learned at LFM that was so vitally important. We use that even now, again, of so the tools I think is just so amazing. And you don't realize that these tools you're going to use for the rest of your life, really, from LFM, from your experience there. So anyways, so we created the elevator speech and we took the message to each individual division. At the time, we were called divisions instead of schools. With Guided Pathways, we've changed to schools, but we took it to every division, and then depending on the group that we were talking to, it could have been Rob, Hans, I, or any combination of that would take the lead. And then whoever had the most trust in the room would be the one to step up and then start the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of interesting. We actually when we expanded that to include a lot more people who were presenting, we
Mhm.
also realized we had to take the lead in rooms that people were scared of going into.
Oh, yeah.
So Tina would always take counseling. Counseling, that was a hard room, and they did not give two craps about what I said. Just not, did track record meant nothing in that
Yeah.
room,
Yeah.
unless you worked for counseling, which Tina
Mhm.
was their advocate and was just absolutely fantastic. There were other times where we modeled that behavior standing with the VPI, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, this was really important for us, but the rooms that I took that were hard, STEM and behavioral and social sciences,
Mhm.
where they
Yeah.
pick your data apart. It's like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
well, I think I've got the most goodwill with these two.
Uh-huh.
I'll take them again. It elevator speeches.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
fun, and you
Yeah.
tailor them, right? Each
Yeah.
one, you tailor the message to the
Correct.
target audience
Yeah.
just a little bit,
I
right?
took athletics,
Yes, you did
because
that, which is wouldn't have
that's,
they wouldn't
yeah.
have liked me.
Yeah, so in counseling, so we actually had a head start on some of this institutional work, because we were already serving as liaison to divisions in counseling. And so again, like I mentioned, we had eventually transitioned over to schools. So we had already kicked off our holistic advising and counseling cohorts, but we were skeptical that this guided pathways was real. And so I had colleagues asking us, well, how long is this initiative actually going to last? When's the next funding change going to happen? Are you guys really doing this work? Do we really have to do all this work? Because it's just going to change in a couple of years. Well, that's what they were used to with our administration, having turnovers. We would have the next new thing, and then some administration would think this way, and then we'd have to go this way. And so, it was really difficult. Counselors were very skeptical because we were told what we had to do. And so
Yeah.
we had a lot of people sitting on that fence, just waiting to see what's the next flavor of the month. So we knew we had to build genuine trust, and really hear people's concerns. And so that was college wide. It wasn't just in
Yeah.
counseling. We really had to hear, everybody's concerns. And so we started a program called Paving the Path, and we had these workshops. And I think that was really our game changer,
Yeah.
that we invited anybody to come on campus to talk about guided pathways. We didn't care what your job title was. We wanted to hear from you. And so it really helped us to identify who are those skeptics, especially the serious ones who had like college clout, people who heard from others, and so I think that really changed, those paving the path really helped us to
Oh,
market
100%.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you had to this people were so afraid of what this could mean because
Mm-hmm.
it hadn't really been defined that we needed to be out there answering any question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we got a lot of difficult questions. And at that time, we were going through building coalitions and engaging resistance, which was, those I think were the most important lessons for
Right.
us. That combined with something that came up for us at a breakout session at a different event, which was a communication plan.
Oh,
And
yes.
we didn't have a communication
Mm-mm.
plan. So those
Mm-mm.
things came together
Mm-hmm.
and formed that for us, which I thought was great. And so we were, looking at, champions and fence sitters and doing all of that good stuff that you do when you do those exercises. And just to give you an idea of Tina and I divided up the school. That's the way we did it. It seemed like half wanted to talk to her and half might talk to me. And so we had this one faculty leader. He'd been in the Senate. He was also in the general humanities, and I had some relationship with him. And we knew that people listened to him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he could change this thing, good or bad, for us.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, he was pretty skeptical, and he
Yeah.
was very, rhetorically very powerful. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that, he would fly off the handle at any time. I don't think we were scared of him.
No.
We just needed him to like, if not be on our side, please don't like destroy the thing while it's trying to lift off, right? So I agreed to this, but the group essentially assigned me to have beer meetings with this gentleman, which I did on several occasions. We had several conversations and several beers,
Mm-hmm.
and during that time, mostly what it turned out is that he just had a lot of very detailed fears and concerns,
Hmm.
and he needed somebody to hear those out.
Hmm.
And at the same time, he actually had a lot of great ideas. And
Hmm.
so, I kept bringing those back, and we actually incorporated a bunch of them. Eventually, we did one of his really big ideas and did GE cards that you passed out to all of the people who were trying to do maps. Like he had some really cool ideas. So over time, he didn't just shift from being skeptical. He became one of our biggest champions. But it's because he saw that people listened to what he was talking about and addressed those concerns. So, when we sat down to our first mapping thing, he's the one who asked the group of in my area, "Hey, can we stay a little longer? I'd just like to hear about the two best classes in your area." And they stayed an hour and a half longer and just kind of talked and bonded at our first training. And if I thought, ooh, something just happened, and
Hmm.
it was really good. So this is we're gonna share a graphic, and this was the graphic we used during that time period. This is our reverse design graphic when we were not at LFM, but we were away trying to do that sort of sky high work where we have our coach Chris Hill, but we also have
Sorry.
no worries. We also have, at the same time, another coach. That coach leaned in at one point and said, "Hey, by the way, we expect this to be rolled out in fall of 2020." And I swear that that table, which was our executive leadership, us and Curtis, just went ashen. And Tina and I had been talking about how to get this thing done. So Curtis looked at us and then he engaged the table in conversation, like a total conversation block. And Tina and I had a cocktail napkin, which I really wish we'd saved. And we wrote fall of 2020 on it, full implementation, and went backwards on the steps we needed. And this is because we'd done a logic model. So that cocktail napkin at the end of that conversation, we started passing it around, was actually the only idea. We realized at this meeting, oh my God, all these executive administrators have invited us to be part of this, and they have no idea how to make this happen. So this being the only thing on the table, it was absolutely accepted. And believe it or not, we got it through Senate, and this became the sort of guiding 2-year plan for the college.
Hmm.
That was developed. We developed the graphic while we were at LFM, and we developed all of the things in the rollout as a home and away team as part of LFM.
Hmm.
Kind of fun, like I really wish I'd kept that napkin. All right. So, we were kind of talking about this before. I just want to say, um, there's two parts of that elevator speech, and we learned it. It's not just the message for the right people, it's the right messenger for the right room. And so we just wanted to reinforce that idea
Hmm.
because as we branched out to other parts of the college, there really were parts that didn't want to hear it from us as much, right?
Hmm.
Like when you were talking with administration, it wasn't bad for us to be in the room, but I really needed to let the VPI lead, right? Like
Oh,
it,
yeah.
it was,
Yeah.
it was different. And it was interesting to watch her reciprocate. Of course, we had a long working relationship. I'd
Hmm.
known her for like 15 years at that point. We were on the Senate together. Um, but she started figuring out, oh, I need to put the co-leads out here. This is not something I can say. If I say it, it's not going to work. And that was kind of cool to see that if you started doing this kind of work and talking about it, other people responded too.
Yeah. And so some of the right people really needed to be in the room of our next project that we wanted to, and those were counselors. And so, as I mentioned earlier, is that, counselors had gone through the ringer. To be honest, it was a very traumatic experience for the counselors, and there was zero shared governance of what they wanted us to do as counselors. And so um, it was difficult. It was a difficult for us to get them on board, but naturally counselors were apprehensive, seeing guided pathways, like I said, another top-down mandate, right? But because we work in the trenches and for years, we've stayed active on campus, my colleagues trusted me and I said, no, 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 this is going to be good for students, students don't know how to guide themselves through MJC. They find this catalog and then what? Unless they come in and see us, they're lost. And so they're taking all these extra classes. And so it was more of a I had to convince them. I really had to convince them that this was a good thing. And so in the summer of 2018, we put together program mapping trainings, and we intentionally shook things up. We put counselors at each table as a facilitator, which counselors was always the stepchild, of the campus, right?
Yeah.
We never had the biggest voice, but even though we were faculty, we never had really a strong voice. And so we purposely, it was Rob's intention really to said, hey, look, you guys, this is your work. This is what you guys do as your discipline. So they intentionally we put the counselors as the facilitator, and so we asked the faculty to grab that catalog and start writing an educational plan for a student that's not part of your discipline. And boy, did they have a difficult time. They had a very difficult time. And so we let them sit in that difficulty. We let them sit there for a bit of uncomfortableness and vulnerability, really, and then we said, this is how your students are feeling as well. This is really how our students are feeling. They are lost. And that is why we are doing this work, is because we don't want them to be lost. And so it was at that moment, I think, the whole campus shifted of why we're doing guided pathways and why it's here to stay. And so I think that was a pivotal point, really, of that training and of that activity.
And we're gonna run a little low on time. So
Hmm.
I think I'm gonna shift us, if you don't
Yeah,
mind, to the our individual paths.
yeah, yeah.
But it's important to point out that we actually got to do this thing. And our coach came to it being rolled out on our Institute Day, our in-service day. Everything had gone through shared governance because I promised I joke that that appointing me was just a matter of wanting to borrow my gravitas. That's what I told them. But it was we actually got at our last coach's visit the whole thing accepted and rolled out at the college. So it was a really exciting thing for us.
Yeah, yeah.
And we'll have a handout for you at the end where you can see some of the things that we built along the way. Just thought it might be good.
Hmm.
Tina,
Yeah.
how has your image of leadership changed since
Yeah.
being a an LFM
Yeah.
participant?
As I said at the beginning, it helped me to recognize what authentic leadership really looked like. I saw that it's the integrity of our partners. It's with new management team that worked across the campus to build relationships, gain trust, and actually shift culture. And so it was the strangest feeling is I knew we were making huge strides, but in my head, I still really wasn't a leader. I was just an advocate, for our students. That was kind of how I kind of thought of it. And then like I mentioned, that training, has opened the doors to, leading me to serve as on several of other LFM projects, which is the LFM data, the data topic, as well as our credit for prior learning teams. So today I'm still coordinating the program maps, on campus alongside credit for prior learning as a coordinator. But the real shift happened a few years ago when Rob and I were asked to speak at a California Guided Pathways Institute. And we were recognized as exemplary holistic student support leader honorees. And that is actually on the moment in which I really believed I was a leader. That is like really when I changed it. That I think I even cried, to be honest with you. And it was just like this moment of I am a leader, and people are following me because I've built that trust on campus. I've built those relationships, and with the help of my partner who helped me along the way. I was just a counselor in my counseling office. I mean, I had worked at a campus. Now this is my 38th year of working at the campus, and I was a student, and I was a classified professional and faculty, adjunct faculty, and then now faculty, and now I'm coordinating, and now I'm, interim articulation officer into the instruction office. So, the LFM has really opened the doors and trained me as a middle leader on our campus. and I feel it. I actually feel it. So.
So would you have done any of those things you just said
Oh
if you
gosh,
hadn't gone to
no.
LSM?
Oh no. Oh no, I would not have done that.
I was
Yeah.
pretty sure I knew the answer. But by the way, we had to attend this thing online, which is why you're getting a phone capture, which was really sad. But when things came back, Ada, who gave this award to us, they invited us to
Hmm.
speak at a breakfast with like 800 people. The new guided pathways team at 8 in the morning.
Hmm.
Might have been more. I don't know. I stopped counting tables, and it was a pretty intense moment of realizing, okay, okay, I guess we are recognized now as doing this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also don't think that I would be where I am if I had not gone to LFM. I think
Hmm.
I would have been very happy to keep working in the Senate and doing things that I thought made a difference and
Hmm.
protecting the 10 plus one.
Right.
But so I don't think it should be surprising for folks that I was really slow to realize that I was leading as well. And Ireri, I'm going to thank her,
Hmm.
asked me to be a coach the next academy. And I said, I think you might have the wrong person. Are you sure? And she started telling me about it. And I was saying no. And she's like, just come around at breakfast and we can talk about it. I would describe this as a reverse interview. And at that point, at the end, I said, well, heck yeah, because and I coached for four more academies, and um, uh, it allowed me to do things and express a style of leadership that I was much more comfortable with, I that has helped me build a skill set. But it also allowed me to do some incredible equity work by working with people who
Hmm.
needed that help. So my favorite of those 2 years, I was actually team coaching with Ireri, the Hoopa higher education folks, and at the time they were just coming out of COVID and they were struggling to be recognized by College of the Redwoods, and everything had gone online, and that was much more productive. And so now they needed the needs of their students understood, that their students
Yeah.
they learned better in person. And they needed them to be acculturated so that they could make the transition over to see our campus. It was this amazing opportunity that, not everybody gets or can lead an equity effort, but this was a place where I could help folks see uh, what the college needed to see, what it wanted to see, have hard conversations with them about how much of their identity they wanted to commodify. I mean, these were intense conversations where we were up there for sometimes 2 or 3 days. And it's probably one of the best things I've ever got to do. And I know it changed lives. So eventually, when I was asked to become a facilitator, I did that. Um, and then I knew my dean would be stepping down, and he'd been trying to court me to do this thing for 10 years. And finally, I'd realized, hey, maybe I can do more outside of the classroom than I can do inside. And so I started getting prepped to do this. And it's at one point I had to tell Tina, I think I have to step down from everything because I can't, in good conscience, be applying for a dean role and still representing the Senate in all of these different arenas, right? Like, so I've got to start doing this thing that I called my year of stepping down. So that was, like 19 years in the Senate. You've done a lot of stuff. You gotta disconnect and get succession plans going so that none of those things are, lost. So I did that. And then at the same time, I started a PhD program to learn about this because besides LFM, everything I knew about leadership, I learned on the street. And the title of that, I can never remember this, I have to look this up, is Developing Mid-Level Leadership in Higher Education, the Effectiveness of Long-Term Professional Development and Building Capacity in California, in the California Community College System. You're not supposed to tell who you studied, but I have permission from the director. So I mean, it's a study of LFM's
Hmm.
alums and what they have chosen after their LFM experience to do. And it's really interesting. Like it's half split between people who stayed in the same job role and people who changed. Like individual mid-level leaders, they make individual decisions.
Hmm.
And I did end up becoming that dean. That's not a surprise to you
Hmm.
because it was in my introduction. But I decided to do it because my area since we got deans in 1978, and I'm only the sixth dean ever to be in this area. And it really has been cultural
Mhm.
preservation
Yeah.
that has made an arts area thrive in a place that doesn't always support the arts. So I felt like it was something I had to do. But what I didn't know is I'd get all the dean stuff and I'd get to still do all the Rob Lane stuff. So I get to, for instance, work with Tina as part of our new general education committee. And there's no reason a new dean should get to be the person who does be the administrator assisting with CalGETSI reform and other things. But because of that track record as the middle leader, I don't know why, but I get to do those things. So I'm not giving up those opportunities. And I just sort of concluding, what do you want to put out there?
Well, I think, I think in terms of my leadership, and I try to, basically lead through consensus building, and I value all voices, no matter what, like I said, what the job title holds. Inclusion, trust, integrity is what I value most, and then, basically having attended the Elephant Academies, I walked away with more confidence in my leading abilities and values and the relationships that built at the academy. And then that also continues on campus. So it's interesting because the relationships I built from Guided Pathways and now the position that I'm in right now as an interim articulation officer, I am now working with those same faculty who built those programs. And now when I'm helping them to revise their courses and their curriculum and stuff, they trust me, and so I just wanted to, yeah, we got 2 minutes.
Yeah, and I'll just conclude with collaboration is absolutely
Yeah.
a possibility at the next level if you were thinking of going into administration, if there's any faculty out there. I'm a big believer in team leadership and
Mhm.
distributional leadership, and those things can happen, right?
Mhm.
People can collaborate and cooperate. And so I think we're proof. Thank you
Yeah.
very much for this amazing 5 year plus now journey. And thank you to LFM and RP
Yes,
for the
absolutely.
opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you so much. I know we have 1 minute. Anyone have any questions or any comments?
And we'll hang out for questions. We just
Yeah.
needed to conclude before 1.
And you did a great job. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you taking an hour of your time to join us.
Nice seeing you again, Candace. Oh, I didn't get to say bye to Hector. Oh well.
Yes.
I'll thank him for coming in a couple weeks.
Mhm. Actually, Candace and her school are presenting next week. I mean, next month.
Oh, very cool. You want to stop the recording?
It was that was an amazing story. It's really